The night was enveloped in a suffocating darkness, and the relentless downpour hammered a sorrowful symphony on the roof of Robert's car. He maneuvered his sleek black sedan through the glistening streets, the headlights casting fleeting reflections on the waterlogged pavement. The windshield wipers tirelessly combated the torrent, yet his mind was adrift, submerged in the looming shadows of the pivotal presentation awaiting him. This was no ordinary meeting. It held the weight of his entire international business's future. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. As the headlights carved through the inky night, Robert mentally rehearsed every nuance of his speech, envisioning his partner's every possible reaction. But then, a stop at a red light shattered his concentration. A scene on the sidewalk drew his gaze and unraveled his carefully woven thoughts. Under the dim halo of a street lamp, a sight tugged at his heartstrings. A young woman, cradling a baby swathed in a threadbare blanket, huddled against the bitter cold, desperate to shield the infant from the unyielding rain. The image pierced his soul, and a fervent voice within him urged, "Help them. Don't just pass by." Robert shook his head, attempting to banish the insistent voice. "It's pouring, and I really don't have time for this right now," he rationalized, his hand trembling on the steering wheel. "Someone else will surely come to their aid." The traffic light turned green, and he sped away, trying to escape the haunting vision. Yet his conscience clung to him, an unrelenting tormentor. The woman and her child lingered in his thoughts, a persistent echo in his rearview mirror, confronting him with his own humanity and the fragility of his existence. It wasn't long before a more malevolent figure emerged from the shadows. A tall man, shrouded in a hood that concealed his face, began to advance toward the woman with a threatening demeanor. She attempted to retreat, but her foot caught on something, sending her sprawling to the ground with a stifled scream, clutching her baby protectively to her chest. That was the breaking point for Robert. He slammed on the brakes, his car skidding to a halt, and he leapt out, oblivious to the rain that now soaked him to the bone. The hooded man, seeing Robert's rapid approach, turned on his heel and melted back into the darkness as swiftly as he had appeared. Robert rushed to the woman's side, his eyes immediately locking onto her blue ones, wide with fear and uncertainty. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice gentle as he extended a cautious hand. She looked up, clearly startled by the sudden appearance of a stranger. "Yes, I think so," she replied, her voice shaking more than her drenched shoulders. His gaze dropped to her knee, which was twisted at an unnatural angle and visibly injured. "Your knee looks pretty bad," he remarked, his concern evident. The woman let out a weary sigh, a blend of pain and resignation etched across her face. "I heard it earlier today. That man has been chasing me for almost 2 blocks. I fell while trying to get away." In a matter of moments, a more sinister figure detached itself from the shadows. A tall man, with his hood pulled low over his head, began to approach the woman in a menacing manner. She tried to move away but stumbled and fell, letting out a muffled scream as she clutched the baby tightly to her chest. This was too much for Robert to ignore. He slammed on the brakes, parking his car abruptly, and jumped out, unconcerned by the rain now soaking him to the bone. The man, noticing Robert's swift approach, turned and vanished into the night as quickly as he had appeared. Robert hurried over to the woman, his eyes immediately drawn to her blue ones, wide with fear and uncertainty. "Are you all right?" he asked gently, extending his hand cautiously. She looked up, clearly surprised by the sudden appearance of a stranger. "Yes, I think so," she replied hesitantly, her voice trembling more than her drenched shoulders. His gaze fell to her knee, twisted at an unnatural angle and visibly injured. "Your knee looks pretty bad," he observed with concern. The woman sighed, a mixture of pain and resignation etched on her face. "I heard it earlier today. That man has been chasing me for almost 2 blocks. I fell while trying to get away." As Robert settled the woman and her baby into the passenger seat, The rain began to taper off, as if even the sky needed a moment to pause and breathe. Robert realized his night was about to take a drastically different turn than he had anticipated, but a part of him felt a profound sense of purpose in this unexpected detour. As he steered the car towards the hospital, the woman broke the silence. "My name is Emily White," she said, her voice still quivering, "and this is Claire, my daughter." Robert nodded to acknowledge her, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. The crucial meeting would have to wait. As the car glided through the now tranquil streets, freshly washed by the rain, Robert tried to maintain his focus, but his attention kept drifting to the woman beside him. Emily cradled Claire close to her chest, the child's small head tucked under a blanket that shielded her from the chill. "How did you end up on the street in this condition?" Robert finally asked, breaking the silence that had settled over them since they left the traffic light. Emily sighed deeply, her gaze fixed on the fogged window. "My life hasn't been easy," she began, her voice low and trembling slightly. "I grew up in an abusive home. My mother died when I was 10, and my father. He never got over her loss. He took his anger out on me. When Claire was born, I knew I had to escape. I couldn't let her grow up in that environment." Her words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of her past. Robert felt a surge of empathy and admiration for her courage. "You've been through so much," he said softly, his voice filled with compassion. "But you're not alone anymore. We'll get you the help you need." As they drove on, the city lights reflecting off the wet pavement, Robert felt a renewed sense of determination. This unexpected encounter had awakened something within him, a desire to make a difference, to offer a glimmer of hope to someone who had endured so much darkness. Emily's story had touched him deeply, and he was resolved to see her through this difficult time, no matter what it took. Robert felt a deep pang in his heart as he listened to Emily's harrowing story. "You are incredibly brave," he said, genuinely admiring the strength of this woman who, despite facing such overwhelming adversity, was determined to give her daughter a better life. Emily offered a faint, grateful smile, nodding in acknowledgement. "I just want Claire to have a chance to be happy, something I rarely experienced," she replied softly. Upon arriving at the hospital, Robert quickly parked and rushed to help Emily out of the car, carefully cradling Claire in his arms while Emily balanced on her injured knee. They made their way to the emergency room entrance, where Robert urgently explained the situation to the receptionist. Within moments, a nurse was summoned. As Emily received immediate attention, Robert took charge of the paperwork, ensuring all necessary forms were filled out and leaving clear instructions to bill any medical expenses to his credit card. "Please ensure she and her baby receive the best possible care," he insisted, his tone unwavering and filled with concern. The nurse, a compassionate middle-aged woman, nodded, visibly moved by Robert's evident concern. "Don't worry, sir. We'll take good care of them." Turning back to Emily, who was now seated in a wheelchair with Claire peacefully asleep in her arms, Robert felt a strange reluctance to leave them. "I need to go now, but I'll return as soon as I can," he promised, his voice tinged with a mix of urgency and reassurance. Emily looked up, her blue eyes glistening with gratitude. "Thank you for everything, Robert. I don't know what I would have done without your help today," she said sincerely. Robert smiled, though it barely masked the complexity of emotions swirling within him. "Take care. I'll be back soon," he assured her, giving one last glance at the sleeping Claire before heading back to his car. As he drove away, the night felt different, charged with a sense of purpose and connection he hadn't anticipated. On the way back to his realm of business and high-stakes meetings, Robert couldn't help but reflect on the unexpected twists life had thrown his way. The image of Emily and Claire lingered vividly in his mind, a poignant reminder of the harsh realities that often went unnoticed in his daily grind. As he pulled into the parking lot of the building where his important meeting awaited, his phone buzzed with an urgent call from his assistant, Alyssa. She spoke rapidly, her voice tinged with anxiety. "Sir, Everyone has arrived for the meeting. You're the only one missing." "I'm already entering the elevator," Robert replied, ending the call abruptly. He took a deep breath, bracing himself for the transition from the world of compassion and chaos he had just left behind to the structured, demanding environment of his corporate life. Yet he knew deep down that something inside him had irrevocably changed on that rainy night. The elevator ascended slowly, and the echo of Alyssa's hurried words reverberated in Robert's mind. He adjusted his tie, more out of distraction than necessity, as he struggled to push away the persistent images of Emily and Claire. "Focus, Robert. Business now," he murmured to himself, attempting to summon the composure and concentration his position demanded. The elevator bell chimed, signaling his arrival on the designated floor. He stepped out, his expression now steely and resolved. Alyssa stood there, her face a mix of concern and relief. "Sir, everyone is waiting. They've asked about you twice already," she said, her tone a blend of urgency and reassurance. Robert nodded curtly, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts. He walked briskly towards the conference room, each step a reminder of the dual lives he was now juggling: the business magnate and the compassionate stranger who had intervened in a desperate moment. As he entered the room, all eyes turned to him. He straightened his posture, donned his authoritative demeanor, and began the meeting with the same determination he had shown when helping Emily and Claire. The difference now was an underlying current of empathy, a newfound depth to his character that would forever influence his actions. "Understood, Alyssa. Let's handle this now," Robert responded with a brief but decisive nod. Together, they walked down the polished corridor to the conference room, where a group of partners and investors were restlessly stirring. As he entered, all eyes immediately turned toward him, loaded with expectations and a hint of irritation. "Robert, where have you been?" "We are behind schedule," remarked one of the partners, a middle-aged man with a stern expression. "I apologize for the delay." "I had an unexpected issue," Robert replied, keeping his voice steady and composed. "But I am here now, and we can begin. Let's focus on what's important." Without waiting for more questions, he moved to the head of the table, opened his laptop, and started his presentation. The slides projected on the wall displayed meticulously prepared graphs and future projections, each designed to persuade and convince. As Robert spoke, his voice carried authority and confidence, though his mind occasionally drifted back to Emily and Claire. Each memory of their plight became a catalyst, fueling his determination and enhancing his performance. He spoke with renewed passion, each word driven by the realization that life's unpredictability demanded resilience and empathy. His audience, initially unsettled by his tardiness, soon found themselves captivated by his presentation. Robert's usual business acumen now carried an undercurrent of humanity, a subtle yet profound shift that did not go unnoticed. As he wrapped up his presentation, the room erupted in applause. His partners and investors, visibly impressed, nodded in agreement with the strategies he had laid out. Robert allowed himself a moment of satisfaction, knowing that despite the night's chaos, he had managed to turn the situation to his advantage. Stepping away from the conference table, Robert felt a sense of fulfillment that went beyond business success. The unexpected encounter with Emily and Claire had infused his work with a deeper sense of purpose. He knew that the night's events had changed him, adding a layer of compassion and resolve to his character that would continue to influence his decisions, both in business and in life. The meeting, initially tense due to Robert's delay, gradually transformed as he expertly guided the discussion. The expressions of those present softened, replaced by nods of agreement and murmurs of approval. Robert, with his usual skill, navigated through complex questions and hypothetical scenarios, defending his positions with the precision of an experienced strategist. As the hours passed, the charged atmosphere gave way to a palpable feeling of accomplishment. When the last slide was presented and the final question answered, A respectful silence filled the room. It was Alyssa who broke the silence, her face lit up with a proud smile. "Congratulations, sir, for once again closing an incredible deal. It was exceptional, even with the delay." Robert nodded, allowing himself a brief moment of satisfaction before closing his laptop. "Thank you, everyone, for your patience and engagement. I appreciate the trust and assure you the results will speak for themselves." The partners stood up, approaching him to shake hands and pat him on the back, each echoing Alyssa's sentiments. As the room emptied, Robert remained for a moment, his thoughts now entirely focused on Emily and Claire at the hospital. The sense of urgency to check on them was undeniable. "Alyssa, could you please wrap things up here? I need to check on something before ending the day," he said, already heading towards the door. Alyssa nodded, understanding the gravity in his tone. "Of course, sir. I'll handle everything here." Robert quickly made his way to the car, his mind racing. The successful meeting, while important, paled in comparison to the worry gnawing at him for Emily and her daughter. The drive to the hospital felt both too long and too short, as his thoughts drifted back to the courage and vulnerability he had witnessed earlier. Arriving at the hospital, Robert rushed inside, his heart pounding. He found Emily and Claire in a small room, Emily's leg now bandaged and propped up, while Claire slept peacefully in a crib beside her. Emily looked up, her eyes lighting up with relief when she saw him. "Robert, you came back," she said, her voice a mixture of surprise and gratitude. "Of course," Robert replied, his tone gentle yet firm. "I wanted to make sure you both were okay. How are you feeling?" Emily sighed, a hint of a smile on her lips. "Better, thanks to you. They've taken good care of us." Robert nodded, feeling a wave of relief wash over him. "I'm glad to hear that. If there's anything else you need, please don't hesitate to ask." As they talked, Robert realized that the night's unexpected events had profoundly changed him. The encounter with Emily and Claire had infused his life with a newfound sense of purpose and compassion. He knew that moving forward, his decisions would be guided not just by business acumen, but by a deeper understanding of what truly mattered. "Of course, sir. All is well here," Alyssa replied as he hurried out, his mind already calculating how long it would take to return to the hospital. As he reached the parking lot, Robert realized he couldn't simply return to his routine. Something about that rainy night had profoundly altered his perspective, and he knew he needed to see Emily and Claire again to ensure they were safe and well cared for. Driving back to the hospital, his phone rang several times, but he ignored it, focused on his new priority. As twilight began to cast its shadows across the city skyline, Robert reflected on the events of the day. He realized that the encounter with Emily and Claire had shifted his understanding of what truly mattered. Arriving back at the hospital, he found himself filled with a sense of urgency and purpose. He walked briskly through the corridors until he reached Emily and Claire's room. The sight of Emily's grateful smile and Claire's peaceful slumber reassured him that he had made the right decision. "Robert, you came back," Emily said, her voice filled with a mix of surprise and gratitude. "Of course," Robert replied warmly. "I needed to make sure you both were okay. How are you feeling?" Emily sighed, relief evident on her face. "Much better, thanks to you. They've taken good care of us." Robert nodded, feeling a wave of relief. "I'm glad to hear that. If there's anything else you need, please let me know." Meanwhile, back at the office, the remnants of the earlier tension were still palpable. As twilight settled over the city, Robert gathered his partners and assistant Alyssa around the large mahogany table to share the unexpected events that had delayed him earlier. "I understand that my delay caused concerns, but I want to explain the reason," Robert began, his serious tone capturing everyone's attention. He recounted his encounter with Emily and Claire, the rush to the hospital, and how the experience had impacted his perception of what really mattered. His partners listened intently, their expressions softening as he spoke. I realized today that sometimes we get so caught up in our business world that we forget about the human element, the real lives affected by our actions, Robert said, his voice filled with conviction. Helping Emily and Claire reminded me that our responsibilities extend beyond these walls. We have the power to make a difference, to help those in need, and that is something we should never lose sight of. The room was silent as Robert's words sank in. Alyssa, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, nodded in agreement. You're right, Robert. We should always strive to remember that. One of the partners, an older man with a stern expression, spoke up. Thank you for sharing this, Robert. It's a powerful reminder of our greater responsibilities. Let's ensure we incorporate this perspective into our future endeavors. Robert smiled, a sense of fulfillment washing over him. The night's events had not only changed his outlook, but had also touched those around him. He knew that moving forward, his decisions would be guided by this renewed sense of purpose and compassion. As he left the office that evening, the weight of the day's events lifted, replaced by a profound sense of hope and determination. William, one of the senior partners, crossed his arms, clearly disapproving of Robert's decision. You put the company's reputation at risk today, Robert, acting impulsively for strangers. That is reckless. Robert remained calm, holding William's gaze firmly. I understand your concern, William, but I do not regret my decision. In moments like these, we need to remember that we are humans before we are businessmen. Alyssa, always the mediator, intervened gently. Perhaps there is a lesson here. Generosity can also be a form of leadership. William and the other partners murmured among themselves, some agreeing with Robert, others still skeptical. Ultimately, the group decided to put the matter aside, prioritizing the continuity of the business. Have a good weekend, everyone. See you Monday, Robert concluded, ending the meeting and the debate with a note of cordiality. The next day, with the morning light bathing the streets, Robert drove back to the hospital, anxious for news of Emily and Claire. His heart beat a mix of hope and apprehension. Upon arriving at the reception, he was greeted with a polite smile from the receptionist, who promptly began to search for information in the system. Good morning, Robert said, trying to mask his anxiety. I'm here to check on Emily White and her daughter Claire. The receptionist nodded, typing quickly. Just a moment, sir. Let me find their details after a brief search. She looked up with a reassuring smile. They are both doing well. Emily is still in room 214. You can go up and see them. Relief washed over Robert as he made his way to the elevator. He felt a deep sense of purpose and fulfillment as he thought about Emily and Claire. The brief ride to the second floor seemed to stretch on, each second amplifying his anticipation. When he reached room 214, he gently knocked and then entered. Emily looked up, a warm smile spreading across her face. Claire was awake, her big eyes curiously taking in her surroundings. Robert, it's good to see you, Emily greeted him, her voice filled with genuine gratitude. I wanted to check on you both, Robert said, approaching the bed. How are you feeling today? Much better, Emily replied, her eyes reflecting a mix of relief and gratitude. The doctors here have been wonderful. Claire is doing well too. Robert nodded, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. I'm glad to hear that. Is there anything you need? Anything at all? Emily shook her head, her eyes moistening. You've already done so much for us. I can't thank you enough. Don't mention it, Robert said softly, his voice filled with warmth. I want to help in any way I can. As they talked, Robert felt a profound connection with Emily and Claire. The bond formed through shared vulnerability and compassion was something he hadn't anticipated but deeply cherished. This experience had altered his perspective, instilling a sense of humanity that transcended his business persona. As the morning sunlight streamed through the hospital room window, Robert realized that the path forward, both in his personal and professional life, would be guided by this newfound sense of empathy and purpose. The events of the past day had not only changed his life, but had also set a precedent for the kind of leader he aspired to be. "Sir, it appears that Emily White and the baby were discharged at the end of the night shift," the receptionist informed him, her voice neutral. Robert furrowed his brow, the news falling like a bucket of cold water on his expectations. "Did they leave any contact information? Any address where they went?" he asked, trying to hide the urgency in his voice. The receptionist checked again, her fingers agile on the keyboard. "Unfortunately, there is nothing recorded here beyond the initial care. I'm sorry, I can't help more than that." Thanking her with a nod, Robert turned away from the counter, his mind swirling with unanswered questions. He walked slowly back to his car, each step echoing his growing sense of frustration and concern. As he drove back home, the reality of the situation began to settle in. Without any clues about the whereabouts of Emily and Claire and no immediate way to locate them, Robert faced a weekend of uncertainties. Upon entering his home, he immediately went to his office, rummaging through his bag in search of his cell phone to see if there was any missed call or message that could be a clue. However, when he tried to turn it on, he discovered that the device was completely discharged. With a sigh of frustration, he placed the cell phone on the charger, his gaze lost in the void as he pondered the next step. That night, as he dined alone, the restlessness and concern only grew, setting the stage for a long and agonizing weekend marked by the absence of news about Emily and Claire. Saturday morning arrived with the first rays of sunlight spreading across the sky. Robert plugged his cell phone into the charger, his mind turbulent with thoughts about Emily and Claire. As soon as the phone turned on, a series of notifications popped up on the screen, all indicating transactions made with a credit card he had left with Emily at the hospital. Robert scanned the amounts and descriptions of the purchases: high-end electronics, a large screen television, and even a gaming console. His jaw tightened in frustration and disappointment. How could she? He murmured to himself, feeling a mix of anger and betrayal. His mind raced as he tried to process the situation. Had he misjudged Emily entirely? The compassionate story she had told him now seemed tainted by these extravagant purchases. Unable to sit still, Robert paced his office, his emotions in turmoil. He had genuinely wanted to help, but now it appeared that his kindness had been exploited. Despite his anger, a small part of him clung to the hope that there might be an explanation. He decided to call the stores where the purchases were made, hoping to find out more information. As he dialed the first number, his heart pounded with a mixture of dread and determination. The customer service representative at the electronics store was sympathetic but had limited information. "The purchases were made online, sir. All I can see is the delivery address." Robert's heart leaped. "Could you please give me that address?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "One moment," the representative replied. Robert could hear typing on the other end. "The address is 1205 Elm Street, apartment 3 billion. Robert thanked the representative and hung up, staring at the address he had scribbled on a notepad. It was a lead, at least. His mind raced with possibilities. Perhaps there was more to the story, and he needed to see it through. Determined to find answers, Robert grabbed his keys and headed out the door. The drive to 1205 Elm Street felt interminable, every traffic light and delay adding to his mounting anxiety. When he finally arrived, he parked and made his way to apartment 3 billion, his heart pounding with anticipation and unease. He knocked on the door, and after a few moments it opened slightly, revealing Emily's surprised face. "Robert," she said, her voice filled with shock and confusion. "Emily, we need to talk," Robert said, his tone a mixture of firmness and concern. "I saw the transactions on the credit card. I need to understand what's going on." Emily's eyes widened, and she opened the door wider, motioning for him to come in. "It's not what you think," she began, her voice trembling. "Please, let me explain." As Robert stepped inside, he saw Claire playing with a small toy on the floor. The apartment was modestly furnished, and the expensive items he had expected to see were nowhere in sight. Emily gestured to the couch, and they both sat down. "Robert, I know how this looks," Emily said, taking a deep breath, "but the purchases were not for me. I was desperate to find a way to make some money quickly to ensure Claire and I had a place to stay. I sold the items to get cash. I didn't know what else to do." Robert listened, his anger slowly giving way to understanding. He could see the fear and desperation in Emily's eyes, and he realized that her actions, though misguided, were driven by a need to survive. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you," Emily continued, her voice breaking. "I didn't want you to think I was ungrateful or taking advantage of your kindness. I was just so scared and didn't know who else to turn to." Robert sighed, the weight of his earlier frustration lifting. "I understand, Emily, but you should have talked to me. We could have found a better solution together." Emily nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "You're right. I should have trusted you. I'm so sorry." Robert reached out and took her hand. "It's okay. Let's figure this out together. You're not alone in this." As they sat together, a sense of resolve filled the room. Robert knew that his unexpected encounter with Emily and Claire had changed him, and he was determined to help them find a stable, safe future. The weekend that had started with uncertainty now held the promise of new beginnings and a deeper understanding of compassion and trust. Determined to clarify the facts, Robert donned his coat and left, heading to the electronics store where the purchases had been made. Upon arriving at the store, he found it bustling with customers exploring the latest technological innovations. He immediately approached the customer service desk, where a young employee greeted him with a polite smile. "Good morning. I need help with some suspicious transactions that were made here yesterday," Robert explained, showing the notifications on his phone. The employee, somewhat surprised by the situation, called the manager. "Let's check that for you, sir," said the manager, a middle-aged woman with a serious expression. "If you can give us a description of who made these purchases, we can start from there." Robert described Emily and also mentioned the suspicious man he had seen the night of the encounter. The manager agreed to access the security camera recordings, and they headed to the back room where the monitors were kept. As the footage from the previous night appeared on the screen, Robert watched attentively, expecting to see Emily making the purchases. However, to his surprise and dismay, it was not Emily who appeared in the recording, but rather the man he had seen approaching her that rainy night. The man moved through the store aisles, selecting the most expensive items with an ease that irritated Robert. The manager paused the footage, clearly understanding the gravity of the situation. "This man matches your description. It appears he used the card to make these purchases," she said, her voice laced with concern. Robert felt a surge of anger and frustration. "So he must have taken the card from Emily. We need to alert the authorities and find him," Robert insisted, his determination unwavering. The manager nodded in agreement. "I'll contact the police and provide them with this footage. Meanwhile, is there anything else I can do for you?" Robert took a deep breath, trying to calm his nerves. "Please make sure Emily and her daughter are safe. I need to find them and make sure they are okay." As the manager made the necessary calls, Robert left the store, his mind racing with thoughts of how to locate Emily and Claire. He decided to check the hospital again, hoping they might have returned or left some clue behind. Upon arriving at the hospital, Robert went straight to the reception desk. "I'm looking for Emily White and her daughter, Claire. I was informed they were discharged, but I'm worried about their safety," he explained urgently. The receptionist, recognizing his concern, quickly checked the records. "I'm sorry, sir. There are no further updates. However, you might want to check the shelter down the street. Sometimes patients go there when they have nowhere else to stay." Thanking her, Robert hurried to the shelter, his heart pounding with a mix of hope and fear. The shelter was a modest building, filled with people seeking refuge from the harsh realities of life. He approached the front desk, where a kind-faced woman greeted him. "Good morning. I'm looking for a woman named Emily White and her daughter Claire. They were discharged from the hospital recently, and I'm very concerned about them," Robert said, his voice tinged with urgency. The woman at the desk looked thoughtful. "I think I remember them. They came in last night, but they left early this morning. Emily mentioned something about trying to find a place to stay with a friend." Robert's heart sank a bit, but he was relieved to know they were still in the area. "Do you know where I might find this friend?" he asked. The woman shook her head. "I'm sorry, she didn't mention an address, but I think she was heading towards the park on Elm Street. Maybe you can start there." With a renewed sense of purpose, Robert thanked the woman and left the shelter, heading towards Elm Street Park. As he arrived, he scanned the area, hoping to catch a glimpse of Emily and Claire. After what felt like an eternity, he spotted them sitting on a bench under a large oak tree. Emily looked up as he approached, her eyes widening in surprise and relief. "Robert, you found us," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Emily, I was so worried," Robert replied, his voice softening. "Are you both okay?" Emily nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "Yes, we are. But that man, he stole your card. I didn't know what to do." "It's okay, Emily. I know now. The police are involved, and they'll handle it," Robert assured her. "Right now, let's focus on getting you both somewhere safe." With a sense of determination, Robert helped Emily and Claire gather their things. As they left the park together, he felt a deep sense of relief and resolve. The events of the past days had taught him the true value of compassion and the importance of acting on it. He knew that his journey with Emily and Claire was just beginning, and he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, guided by empathy and a commitment to making a positive difference in their lives. "That's the man," Robert pointed at the screen, anger rising within him. "But I don't see Emily with him. Were they together? Was it all a scam?" The manager paused the image, clearly showing the man's face. "We don't recognize him as one of our regular customers," she commented, "and we definitely didn't see the woman you described." Frustrated, but now with more questions than answers, Robert thanked the manager for her assistance and left the store. The possibility of having been deceived, of Emily possibly colluding with that man, gnawed at him internally. Yet something inside him still resisted believing that it was all just a ruse. Determined to uncover the whole truth, Robert decided that his next step would be to confront the man from the images directly if he could find him. With a copy of the security footage in hand and the image of the suspect etched in his mind, he got into his car, heading to the nearest police station to file a report and seek help from the authorities. Armed with the security footage and seething with a mix of determination and anger, Robert arrived at the local police station. The corridors were bustling, filled with the characteristic hum of a busy morning. He approached the reception desk, where a uniformed police officer greeted him with a look of professional caution. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked, noting the tense expression on Robert's face. "Yes, I need to report a fraud and possibly a case of manipulation." "I believe this man," Robert said, handing over a copy of the security recording to the officer, "is involved, and he might be trying to harm an innocent woman." The officer examined the footage and nodded, understanding the seriousness of the situation. "Please follow me, sir. We'll get an officer to assist you right away." She led Robert to a small office where a detective was seated, going through some paperwork. "Detective Harris, "This gentleman needs to report a possible fraud and manipulation case," she said, handing the footage to the detective. Detective Harris, a seasoned officer with a stern but approachable demeanor, took the footage and gestured for Robert to sit. "Please, have a seat and tell me everything that happened." Robert recounted the events of the past few days, starting with his encounter with Emily and Claire, the subsequent purchases made with his card, and his discovery of the man on the security footage. Detective Harris listened intently, occasionally taking notes. "This man," Robert pointed to the screen again, "was the one I saw approaching Emily that night. I believe he might have taken the card from her or coerced her in some way." Detective Harris nodded thoughtfully. "We'll run a check on this individual and see if we can identify him. In the meantime, we'll also try to locate Emily and Claire to ensure their safety and get their side of the story." "Thank you," Detective Roberts said, relief mixing with his ongoing concern. "I just want to make sure they're safe and that justice is served." Detective Harris stood, offering a reassuring smile. "We'll do everything we can, Mr. Robert. Please leave your contact information with us, and we'll update you as soon as we have more information." Feeling a bit lighter, Robert left the police station. The authorities were now involved, and he had done everything in his power to help Emily and Claire. Still, the nagging uncertainty about Emily's possible involvement lingered in his mind. He hoped for the best, but prepared himself for any outcome. Back at home, Robert tried to distract himself with work, but his thoughts kept returning to the events of the past few days. The next morning, his phone rang, and the caller ID showed it was the police station. His heart pounded as he answered. "Mr. Robert, this is Detective Harris. We've identified the man from the footage. He has a record of fraud and manipulation. We're also trying to locate Emily and Claire, and we have officers searching for them. We'll keep you updated on any developments." "Thank you," Detective Robert replied, a mix of relief and anxiety in his voice. "I appreciate your efforts." As the day wore on, Robert found it difficult to focus on anything else. Late in the afternoon, his phone rang again. This time it was an unknown number. Hesitantly, he answered. "Hello, is this Robert?" a familiar voice asked. It was Emily. "Emily, are you okay?" "Where are you?" Robert asked urgently. "I'm fine, Robert. I'm sorry for everything that's happened. The man you saw, he's been blackmailing me. He took your card and made those purchases. I was too scared to tell you," Emily explained, her voice shaking. "Emily, you should have told me. We could have dealt with this together," Robert said, his anger dissipating into concern. "Where are you now?" "I'm at a friend's place. The police found me and brought me here for safety." "They're looking for the man," Emily replied. "Stay safe, Emily." "I'll come to see you," Robert said, relief flooding over him. "Thank you, Robert." For everything Emily said, her voice filled with gratitude. As he hung up the phone, Robert felt a sense of resolution. The events of the past few days had been tumultuous, but they had also reaffirmed his belief in the power of compassion and human connection. He was ready to move forward, knowing that he had done everything in his power to help and protect those in need. The officer reviewed the footage briefly and called in a detective. Robert explained the entire situation, from his encounter with Emily and Claire to the discovery of the fraudulent purchases. The detective, a middle-aged man with a penetrating gaze, listened attentively and agreed to help. "Let's see what we can do to locate this man. You said you have his address, right?" the detective asked. With assistance from the electronics store, Robert had obtained the address of the suspect, which was registered for the delivery of the purchased items. Armed with this information, Robert, the detective, and a team of police officers headed to the indicated area, a worn-down and impoverished neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. Upon arrival, the detective coordinated a cautious approach. The narrow streets and dilapidated houses painted a picture of neglect. Robert felt growing tension with each step, bringing them closer to the man he had seen in the security footage. Suddenly, as they turned a corner, Robert spotted the man. "There he is," he exclaimed, pointing. The suspect, realizing he was being watched, began to run. The officers sprang into action, chasing the man through the tight alleyways. After several tense minutes, they managed to apprehend him, handcuffing him as he struggled to break free. Back at the station, the man, who was identified as Marcos, was placed in an interrogation room. Robert watched through the one-way glass as the detective began the interrogation. "Why were you using someone else's credit card to purchase expensive items?" the detective asked, his voice calm yet authoritative. Marcos looked down, his hands trembling slightly. "It was Emily. She gave me the card, said I could use it to buy some things," he claimed, his voice faltering. Robert, listening from behind the glass, felt a wave of frustration and disbelief. He and the officers exchanged skeptical looks. "He's lying," Robert muttered to himself, almost unable to believe that Emily could be involved. But doubt began to set in, leaving an uncomfortable feeling. "Let's verify this story," the detective said, leaving the room to continue the investigation. Meanwhile, Robert sat in the waiting room of the station, his thoughts swirling. Everything seemed increasingly complicated, and he knew he needed to keep a cool head to uncover the truth. After the tumultuous interrogation, Robert felt powerless and confused. He decided to let the police and his lawyer, a competent professional named Samuel, handle the case. In the days that followed, he dove back into work, trying to push thoughts of Emily, Claire, and the mysterious Marcos from his mind. However, uncertainty continued to echo in his thoughts, a persistent shadow over his days. 2 weeks of restlessness and hard work passed when, on a quiet afternoon, Robert's cell phone vibrated with a call from an unknown number. He was in the middle of a meeting and ignored the call, assuming it could be a salesperson or some sort of spam. When the phone rang again, he silenced it without looking. The third time, curiosity and an inexplicable sense of urgency made him answer. "Hello," he spoke, his voice tinged with slight irritation from the interruption. On the other end, there was a pause, and then a female voice, tremulous and hesitant, spoke quickly. "I'm sorry, I was forced to do this," said the voice, and before Robert could respond, the line was cut off, leaving a buzzing silence in his ear. Robert stood still, holding the phone to his ear, trying to process the words. Forced to do what he murmured to himself, perplexed. The voice seemed familiar, but the rapidity of the call left him doubting his own senses. Returning to the table, he stared at the cell phone display, hoping the person would call back, but the phone remained silent. Is this another trick, he thought, suspicion now a constant companion? Making a quick decision, he left the conference room and went straight to Samuel's office. "Samuel, I just received a strange call. A woman said she was forced to do this and then hung up. I need to find out if it was Emily. Can you trace the number?" Samuel, always pragmatic and efficient, nodded while already starting to type on his laptop. "Let's see what we can find out, Robert. These calls could be a breakthrough or a new layer of this confusion." As Samuel worked, Robert sat down, his mind racing. The uncertainty about the intention behind the call consumed him. If it was Emily, why would she call after all this time? And what had she been forced to do? The possibility that she might be in danger began to take shape in his mind, bringing with it a new sense of urgency. Samuel finally looked up, his expression serious. "The number is from a public phone, which complicates things a bit, but it's located in an area close to where you said you first encountered Emily. It's worth investigating." With this new information, Robert felt a renewed determination. "Let's go then," he said, picking up his car keys. "If there's any chance this could lead us to Emily and clarify this whole situation, then I need to check it out personally." They left the office, the sky already darkening as they headed to the location of the phone booth, each lost in their thoughts about what they might discover when they arrived. Robert and Samuel arrived at the location where the phone booth was situated, a dark corner on a poorly lit street. The public telephone, an almost forgotten relic of urban communication, seemed an anachronistic point in the modern landscape. Robert scanned the area, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. The surrounding buildings cast long shadows, and the street was eerily quiet, with only the occasional distant sound of traffic breaking the silence. The phone booth stood like a sentinel of the past, its glass panels smeared with grime and the receiver hanging slightly askew. "We should split up and look around," Robert suggested, his voice low. "See if there are any clues or if anyone saw something." Samuel nodded, agreeing with the plan. "I'll check the nearby shops and ask if anyone noticed anything unusual," he said before heading off towards a small convenience store a few doors down. Robert approached the phone booth, his heart pounding in his chest. He looked around for any signs that might indicate recent activity but found nothing obvious. He picked up the receiver, listening for a dial tone, but the line was dead. Frustration and anxiety gnawed at him, but he pushed those feelings aside, focusing on the task at hand. A figure emerged from the shadows, startling Robert. It was an old man, shuffling along with a cane. He seemed to be in no hurry, his movements deliberate and slow. "Excuse me, sir," Robert called out, approaching the man cautiously. "Have you seen anyone using this phone recently?" The old man squinted at Robert, then shook his head. "Not many people use those things anymore," he replied, his voice raspy with age. "But I did see a young woman here earlier today. She looked worried, kept looking over her shoulder." Robert's heart skipped a beat. "Did you see where she went?" The old man pointed down the street. She headed that way, towards the park. Looked like she was in a hurry. "Thank you," Robert said, a mix of hope and fear flooding through him. Samuel returned, just in time to hear the old man's directions. The shopkeeper didn't see anything, he reported, but if she went towards the park, we should check it out. They walked briskly towards the park, the sense of urgency driving them forward. The park was dimly lit, with only a few streetlights casting weak pools of light. Shadows loomed large, and the rustling of leaves added to the eerie atmosphere. As they entered the park, Robert's phone buzzed. It was a text message from an unknown number. "Meet me at the old gazebo. Come alone." Robert showed the message to Samuel, who frowned. "It could be a trap. Or it could be our only lead," Robert replied. "Stay close, but out of sight. I'll go to the gazebo." Samuel nodded, understanding the need for caution. "Be careful." Robert made his way through the park, the path winding and unfamiliar. The old gazebo came into view, its structure dilapidated and forgotten, much like the phone booth. He approached cautiously, his senses on high alert. "Emily," he called out softly, stepping onto the creaky wooden floor of the gazebo. A figure emerged from the shadows, and Robert's breath caught in his throat. It was Emily, looking tired and worn, but unmistakably her. "Robert," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "Thank you for coming." Robert stepped closer, his relief palpable. "Emily, what's going on? Why all the secrecy?" Emily glanced around nervously before speaking. "There's so much you don't know. My father, he's in deeper trouble than I realized. And Marcos, he's part of something much bigger. They're watching me, using me. I had to disappear to keep Claire safe." "We'll get you both out of this," Robert promised, his determination solidifying. "But we need to go now before they find you." Emily nodded, her fear mingled with hope. Together they left the gazebo, rejoining Samuel at the edge of the park. As they made their way back to the car, Robert felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead would be fraught with danger, but with Emily and Claire by his side, he was ready to face whatever came their way. Their story was far from over, each step a testament to their resilience and unyielding hope. And as they drove away, the city lights flickering in the distance, they knew they were stronger together, ready to confront the challenges that lay ahead. "I'll try calling the number back," Robert said, pulling out his cell phone. His fingers hesitated for a moment before dialing the number from the received call. As the phone rang, he felt a mix of hope and apprehension. Finally, the call was answered. "Hello, is this you, Emily, if that is your real name?" Robert said, his voice tinged with suspicion. There was a pause on the other end, then a tearful and clearly distressed voice responded. "Yes, it's me, Robert. I'm so sorry for everything. I was forced to give the card to Marcos. He's a loan shark. He was threatening me and my daughter. I tried to escape, but he found us." Robert's heart raced as he heard the confirmation of his suspicions and fears. "Emily, where are you now? I need more details. How did he find you, and how did he threaten you?" She sobbed before responding, her voice still shaky. "I'm hiding now. He found me a day after I left the hospital. Marcos knew where I used to go. He forced me to give him the card, saying that if I didn't, something bad would happen to Claire." Emily's anguish was palpable even through the distance. "Please, Robert, you need to believe me. I'm sending you the address where I am now. You can come and check my documents, see for yourself who I am." Robert quickly noted down the address Emily provided. "I'm on my way. Stay where you are and don't talk to anyone else about this," he instructed, while Samuel, who was beside him, listened intently. As soon as he hung up, Robert turned to Samuel. "She's in danger, Samuel. We need to help her." Samuel nodded, his expression grave. "I'll contact the police to make sure we have support. We don't know what kind of situation we're going to find." Together, they returned to the car and drove to the address provided by Emily. The journey was silent, both men lost in their thoughts about the possible implications of what they were about to discover. Upon arriving at the location, a worn-down building in an even more forgotten area of the city, Robert felt a knot form in his stomach. "I hope we're still in time," he murmured as they climbed the steps to the indicated apartment. Robert knocked on the door, his heart pounding with anticipation and fear. Moments later, the door slowly opened, and Emily appeared, visibly shaken but alive. She quickly let them in, looking nervously down the hallway before closing the door. Inside the apartment, Robert could see documents scattered over a small dining table, evidence of Emily's life, perhaps enough to clarify everything. But before they could talk further, Robert's phone rang again, interrupting the moment. It was his lawyer with urgent news about Marcos. In the days following the visit to Emily's apartment, Robert and Samuel worked tirelessly to unravel each piece of the puzzle that involved Emily's life. The urgency of the situation motivated them at every step as they awaited the promised information from Robert's lawyer. Finally, on a humid and stuffy afternoon, Robert's phone rang. It was his lawyer, Thomas, whose tone of voice indicated both relief and concern. "Robert, I have good news and some important confirmations," Thomas began. "We have managed to verify Emily's identity through a series of documents and records. She is indeed who she says she is, Emily White, daughter of Edward White, and her father has a disturbing history with several assault complaints registered against him." Robert felt a mix of relief and anxiety upon hearing these words. "This explains a lot, Thomas, but it also increases my concern for her and little Claire's safety. We need to act quickly." "I fully agree," Thomas replied. "I will continue to investigate and keep you informed of any developments." After hanging up, Robert grabbed his cell phone with renewed determination. He dialed Emily's number, hoping to speak with her about the findings and discuss the next steps to ensure her safety. The phone rang several times before Emily finally answered. Robert, her voice sounded cautious and slightly tremulous. "Emily, it's me. I received some important information from my lawyer that we need to discuss." "Are you in a safe place right now?" Robert asked, his voice laden with concern. Before Emily could respond, a loud bang interrupted the conversation. Robert heard the sound of something heavy hitting what seemed to be a door. "Emily, what's happening there?" he exclaimed, his heart racing with fear of what that might mean. Emily began, but was interrupted by another bang, followed by muffled screams. The phone fell, and the sound of fighting and confusion took over the environment. "Emily," Robert shouted into the phone, unable to do more than listen. The sound of a door being broken down and more screams filled his ears, increasing his desperation. Not knowing what else to do, Robert rushed to his car, the phone still pressed to his ear, listening to the sounds of a fight that seemed to grow more violent. As he drove back to Emily's apartment, he tried to remain calm, but fear and worry dominated his thoughts. Approaching the location, the sound of sirens could already be heard in the distance. The call was still connected, but only indistinct noises and occasional words from Emily could be heard. Robert parked the car hastily and ran towards the building, hoping to find Emily safe but fearing the worst. Robert raced down the hallway of Emily's building, the phone pressed against his ear as he listened to the sounds of struggle and desperation from the other side of the line. Did Marcos go after her? He shouted to the lawyer, who was still on the phone, trying to coordinate a response with the police. "He escaped custody a few days ago," the lawyer said, his voice tense, conveying the gravity of the situation. "Sorry, Robert, I didn't think it was important to inform you earlier. We didn't think he would attempt something so direct." "This is crucial, Thomas. We need the police now," Robert exclaimed as he climbed the stairs, taking two at a time. "I'm heading to her apartment. Do whatever you can to bring help." As soon as he reached Emily's floor, Robert headed to her apartment with his heart pounding furiously in his chest. The hallway was eerily silent, but the muffled sounds of fighting still came through the phone, giving him an even greater sense of urgency. He reached the door, which was ajar, a clear sign of forced entry visible on the damaged lock. "Emily," he called out as he pushed the door open and entered. The apartment was in disarray, furniture overturned, and personal items scattered across the floor. The sound of a struggle came from the bedroom at the end of the hallway. Robert advanced through the apartment, his heart loud in his ears. As he approached the bedroom, the sounds of fighting intensified. With a push, he opened the bedroom door and saw Emily struggling to free herself from a man that Robert immediately recognized as Marcos. "Let her go," Robert shouted, moving in to intervene. Marcos, surprised by the sudden interruption, released Emily and turned to face Robert. "You shouldn't be here," Marcos growled, positioning himself defensively. Emily, trembling and with tears in her eyes, retreated to a corner of the room, watching the scene with evident terror. Without hesitation, Robert advanced on Marcos, using all the adrenaline the moment demanded. They fought, a tense physical confrontation that knocked more furniture around as they struggled. Robert managed to land a blow that caused Marcos to stumble backward, crashing against the wall. "Robert, I'm okay," Emily managed to say, her voice a tremulous whisper. At that moment, the sounds of approaching sirens could be heard in the distance. The police, finally alerted by the lawyer, were arriving. Robert kept Marcos subdued, waiting for the police to enter and take control of the situation. As he held Marcos, relief at having arrived in time mixed with anger over the danger Emily and Claire had faced. He knew the next few hours would be crucial to ensure Marcos no longer posed a threat. "It's all right now, Emily. It's all right," Robert repeated, trying to calm both himself and her as the police finally burst through the apartment, ready to take charge of the situation. Robert's heart raced frantically as he drove at high speed through the nearly empty streets, each traffic light and curve intensifying the tension that already consumed him. The urgency to reach Emily's apartment before something worse happened propelled him, making him almost completely ignore the speed limits. As soon as he arrived at the building, he parked the car with a jolt and ran out, not even bothering to lock the door. Adrenaline pulsed through his veins as he crossed the lobby and climbed the stairs, taking 2 steps at a time, not waiting for the elevator. Each step was guided by the sound of Emily's despair, still echoing in his mind. Reaching the hallway of her apartment, Robert saw the door ajar. Without hesitation, he entered, his heart pounding against his chest. Inside the apartment, the sounds of struggle were clear and directed Robert straight to Emily's bedroom. There he found Marcos trying to force his way into the room where Emily was evidently locked in. Without a second thought, Robert yelled, "Marcos, step away from her now." Surprised by Robert's sudden arrival, Marcos turned around with an expression of fury. "This is none of your business, Robert," he growled, advancing towards Robert with brutal determination. Although not a professional fighter, Robert had trained in some forms of personal defense and was prepared to use all his skills. He positioned himself defensively, sizing up his opponent, and when Marcos charged, Robert used Marcos's own momentum against him, dodging and applying an arm lock that brought him to the ground with a grunt of pain. "She will never be your property, Marcos." "This ends now," Robert shouted, keeping Marcos immobilized on the ground. At that moment, the police, alerted by Samuel, finally arrived, storming into the apartment with quick and firm steps. They quickly assessed the situation and handcuffed Marcos, who still tried to struggle. With Marcos now under police custody, Robert turned to the bedroom door, which was locked. "Emily, it's me, Robert. It's all safe now. You can open the door." There was a pause and then the sound of locks being undone. The door slowly opened, and Emily appeared, visibly shaken, her eyes red and swollen from tears. Upon seeing Robert, she ran to him, embracing him tightly. "Robert, I don't know what I would have done without you." "Thank you for not giving up on me," she sobbed, clinging to him as if she never wanted to let go. Robert comforted her, holding her tightly. "You'll never have to face something like this alone again, Emily. We'll make sure he can't hurt you again," he promised, feeling a mix of relief and anger, thinking about the terror she had endured. As the police began to ask questions and process the scene, Robert stayed by Emily's side, ensuring she felt safe and protected. However, despite the immediate relief, he knew there were still challenges ahead. They would need to face the legal and emotional consequences of what had happened. In the days following the confrontation with Marcos, Emily's life began to take a new direction under Robert's protection and care. Although the trauma of the incident still loomed over her like a shadow, Robert's constant and reassuring presence offered a counterpoint of safety and comfort. Robert became a constant figure in Emily's apartment, helping her to rebuild not just the physical space that had been damaged, but also the confidence she needed to move forward. He brought in painters and carpenters, transforming the formerly somber environment into a warm and bright home. "How are you feeling today?" Emily Robert would ask during one of his daily visits while Claire played with a new set of toys on the living room floor. "A bit better, Robert. Seeing the apartment transform helps me believe that things can really change for the better," Emily would respond, offering him a shy smile, which Robert returned with affection. As the weeks passed, Robert and Emily began to go out together, initially to open and calm spaces like parks and gardens, where Claire could play while they talked about everything except the recent trauma. It was during these outings that Robert realized how much his affection for Emily had grown, a feeling that began to intertwine with his admiration for her strength and resilience. "You're incredible, Emily. Not just for everything you've gone through, but for the way you're rebuilding your life," Robert confessed on a sunny afternoon as they watched Claire chase butterflies. Emily blushed slightly, touched by his words. "I couldn't have done it without you, Robert. You came at just the right time and changed everything for the better." Despite the growing romantic atmosphere, Robert knew that Emily's recovery journey was far from over. They faced legal challenges, with the case against Marcos still ongoing, and regular visits to the therapist to help Emily cope with the trauma. "Every day is a step forward, Emily, and I'll be here with you at every step," he promised, holding her hand as they walked back home after a day outdoors. However, despite the new beginnings and the growing bond between them, the reality of legal and emotional complications sometimes cast a shadow over their moments of happiness. As they prepared to face the next chapter of their lives, Robert knew the path ahead would still demand a lot from both of them. It was a quiet afternoon, and as Claire slept after a long day of play, Robert and Emily sat together on the couch, sharing a moment of silence. Robert's phone rang, breaking the calm of the moment. It was his lawyer with news about the case against Marcos, a conversation they knew to be inevitable but still hesitated to begin. As the days passed, Robert and Emily worked together on rebuilding her life, striving to leave the remnants of the trauma behind. Using his extensive resources and contacts, Robert found a new apartment for Emily and Claire in a safer, more tranquil area of the city. The move was not just physical, it represented a fresh start, a chance to begin anew with greater security and hope. "Look, Emily, this place has 24-hour security and a beautiful park right next door. Claire is going to love it," Robert explained as they toured the new apartment. The freshly painted walls and spacious rooms bathed in sunlight brought a glimpse of a brighter future. Emily looked around, holding Claire's hand, her eyes lighting up a bit as she imagined a life without constant fear. "It's perfect, Robert. I don't know how to thank you for everything you're doing for us," she said, her voice laden with gratitude. "You don't need to thank me, Emily. Seeing you two safe and happy is all I need," Robert replied, genuinely pleased to be able to help. Despite these promising new beginnings, the threat of Marcos and his connection still cast a shadow over the new life they were trying to build. During a quiet afternoon, while they were organizing some of Emily's belongings in the new apartment, Robert received a call from his lawyer that made his heart stop. "Robert, we have a problem," the lawyer said as soon as Robert answered the phone. "It seems Marcos was not acting alone. He had allies, and our information suggests they are not pleased with his arrest. They might try something against Emily to get revenge or to try to intimidate her before the trial." Robert's blood ran cold at these words. He looked at Emily, who was playing with Claire, completely unaware of the new threat. "What can we do? We need to protect them," he asked, his voice tense. "I'm working with the police to enhance security around Emily and Claire. Additionally, I recommend that we consider additional personal protection measures for them. It might be prudent to hire private security until this is resolved," the lawyer suggested. Robert immediately agreed, determined to do whatever was necessary to ensure Emily and Claire's safety. "Please organize that and keep me informed of any developments." Hanging up the phone, Robert approached Emily, his expression serious. "Emily, we need to talk. There's a new situation we need to discuss," he began, preparing to explain the new threat looming over them. Together, they spent the afternoon planning how to deal with this new threat, determined to protect the peace they were trying so hard to rebuild. The conversation was grave and necessary, a mix of precautions and promises as they planned how to keep their small, rebuilt family safe. As the sun set, bringing twilight to the end of the day, Robert felt a mix of determination and apprehension. He knew that despite the challenges, he would not give up on fighting for Emily and Claire's safety and happiness. The shadow of Marcos and his allies would not darken the future they were trying to build together, one day at a time. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Robert, Emily, and Claire settled into a tranquil routine, a life filled with small pleasures and daily discoveries. They established a routine that interwove their lives in such a way that each day seemed to bring a new reason to be thankful. Claire was growing quickly, her laughter the soundtrack of their days and her insatiable curiosity the spark for many family adventures. One serene afternoon, as they sat in their garden watching Claire play, Robert held Emily's hand. "Can you believe how much our lives have changed?" he asked, a warm smile on his lips. Emily looked at him, her eyes shining with a mix of gratitude and love. "Sometimes it feels like a dream, one that I never want to end," she replied, squeezing his hand. "You've transformed our lives, Robert, in ways I never imagined possible." It was true. What had begun as a compassionate gesture on a rainy night had evolved into a deep emotional connection. They had woven a tapestry of life together that neither had anticipated, but now neither could imagine any other way. "I will always be here for you two, no matter what happens. We will face anything together," Robert said, determined. Emily nodded, knowing that with Robert by her side, she could face anything. As the sun set, painting the sky with vibrant colors, a figure approached their home's gate. It was Samuel, the lawyer, with a solemn expression that immediately made Robert stand up. "Robert, Emily, sorry to interrupt, but we need to talk," Samuel began, looking seriously at both of them. "I received a call from the police. There's news about Marcos and apparently about something you need to know." Robert and Emily exchanged a concerned look, each feeling a twinge of anxiety about what was to come. "What happened?" Robert asked, his tone steady. "Marcos made a full confession, but it's not just about the crimes we knew," Samuel explained, pausing to ensure he had their attention. "He revealed he was being manipulated, part of a larger scheme that involves some quite influential people in the city. And Emily, it seems your father was involved." The shock of this revelation hit Emily like a physical blow. "My father? But how? He never mentioned." "Yes, it seems he was deep in debt with some dangerous people. Marcos was being used to pressure you, to manipulate situations that benefited your father without your knowing," Samuel continued, each word heavy in the air. Emily's past, which they thought they had left behind, had resurfaced with a twist none of them expected. What had started as a redemption story now intertwined with a plot of deeper intrigues and mysteries. Robert squeezed Emily's hand, reaffirming his silent commitment to face any challenges that came their way. "What does this mean for us?" Emily asked, her voice shaky. "We'll find out together," Robert responded, his determination clear. "Nothing will tear us apart." Amid these startling revelations, Robert, Emily, and Claire prepared to face the ramifications of this new threat, united and resilient. Their story was far from over, each new page a promise of struggles, but also of unshakable hope and love. They now knew that no matter what fate held, they would face it together as a family. Their path forward was uncertain, filled with potential dangers and challenges, but in their unity they found strength. As they stood together, they realized that their bond was stronger than any force that could come against them. They had faced betrayal, manipulation, and fear, and they had emerged with a deeper understanding of their resilience and love for one another. Emily took a deep breath, her resolve solidifying. "We'll get through this. We'll find out who these people are and why they're doing this. We'll fight back." Robert nodded, his expression fierce with determination. "We'll protect Claire and each other. We're in this together, and nothing will break us." As they embraced, the weight of the recent revelation seemed to lift slightly, replaced by a shared sense of purpose. They were not just victims of a larger conspiracy, they were a family ready to confront and overcome any obstacle. "Thank you for standing by me," Emily whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "I don't know what I would do without you." "You'll never have to find out," Robert replied, his voice steady. "We're a team now, and we'll face whatever comes our way." With newfound resolve, they began to make plans, knowing that their journey was far from over. They would seek justice, protect each other, and build a future free from the shadows of the past. Each step they took together was a testament to their unbreakable bond and unwavering hope. They knew that, united, they could face any challenge and emerge stronger. Their story was just beginning, a tale of resilience, love, and the power of family. As they moved forward, they carried with them the lessons of the past and the promise of a brighter future. As our story unfolded, we witnessed how a millionaire's unexpected encounter with a woman and her newborn baby in the rain set off a chain of events that revealed hidden dangers and deeper truths. By handing over his credit card, Robert demonstrated the power of compassion and the unexpected twists that can come from a single act of kindness. Through their journey, Robert, Emily, and Claire faced tremendous challenges but emerged stronger, bound by their determination to protect each other and seek justice. What have you learned from this story so far? Share one lesson that resonated with you and how you plan to apply it in your life. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you like this video, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you for your support, and see you in the next video.